In 1932, the Australian government sent battle-hardened World War I veterans armed with machine guns to fight a war against 20,000 emus. For years, people dismissed the Great Emu War as internet folklore, but military archives prove every humiliating detail: official reports, artillery deployment, and a staggering 10,000 bullets fired for barely 1,000 confirmed kills. This isn't a meme. It's the moment a desperate nation declared war on birds and lost. What happened in the wheat fields of Western Australia exposed not just military futility, but a government willing to abandon its own heroes. How did a country lose a war to birds, and why did nobody stop it before disaster struck? Promises of prosperity lured thousands of returned soldiers into the heart of Western Australia. After the First World War, the government handed out plots of land, often little more than dry, stubborn ground, along with the assurance of easy loans and steady government support. By the early 1930s, those promises had collapsed. Wheat prices had plummeted to half their pre-depression value, and the government quietly withdrew the subsidies that were supposed to keep farmers afloat. For many, the numbers simply stopped adding up. Bank records from the wheat belt show a surge in defaults. Shire council minutes are filled with desperate petitions for relief, road repairs, or loan extensions. 1 in 4 soldier-settler farms in the Campion district had already been abandoned by 1932. Some families left behind empty houses and silent fields, their debts piling up in court ledgers. Others stayed only because there was nowhere else to go. The hardship went beyond numbers on a ledger. Unemployment in the region climbed past 30%. Yields dropped well below what was needed to break even, with wheat harvests shrinking to 8 or 10 bushels per acre, far short of the minimum to cover costs. In personal letters and local newspapers, families wrote of broken machinery, ruined crops, and a government that had vanished when help was needed most. The land that was meant to be a reward for service had become a trap. By the time the emus arrived, many veterans were already teetering on the edge of ruin. At harvest, the fields of Campion became a testing ground for every trick farmers could muster. Scarecrows stood in uneven rows, their hats and ragged coats fluttering in the wind. Some men tried firing warning shots or chasing the birds on foot, but the emus seemed to learn faster than any human could adapt. Flocks gathered by the hundreds, then scattered the moment a rifle cracked, only to regroup in another paddock minutes later. Old wire fences, meant to keep sheep and cattle in, proved useless against birds that could run over 30 miles per hour and slip through any gap. Even the most determined shooters found themselves outflanked. Oral histories tell of farmers watching as emus sent out a single tall bird to stand apart from the rest, an apparent lookout. At the first sign of movement, the sentinel would signal, and the whole flock would pivot, bolting away in a blur of legs and dust. Local newspapers described the birds as if they were a well-drilled army, splitting into small groups whenever threatened and returning at dusk to finish off what was left. Each failed attempt left more wheat flattened, more fences broken, and more hope lost. By late 1932, the sense of a fair fight had vanished. It was not just a battle for crops, but a contest of wits, and the birds, for now, were winning. On the 1st of November 1932, the official orders came through. The government, under mounting pressure from desperate veterans and a restless Western Australia, authorized a military deployment into the wheat belt. Defense Minister George Pearce signed off on the plan. It wasn't just about killing birds, it was about showing the country, and a skeptical state, that Canberra was willing to act with force. 2 Lewis machine guns, fresh from Army stores, were loaded into a battered truck. 10,000 rounds of .303 ammunition were checked and counted. The Royal Australian Artillery's 7th Heavy Battery assigned Major G.P.W. Meredith, Sergeant S. McMurray, and Gunner J. O'Halloran to the task. But this was no ordinary field operation. Alongside the soldiers, a Fox movie-tone cameraman packed his reels and set out for Campion. Newsreel crews had never followed an Australian military action like this before. The government wanted the spectacle on film, proof for voters that they were standing by their returned soldiers, and a warning to any talk of Western Australian secession. Cabinet memos and internal correspondence, now held in the National Archives, show the emphasis on visibility. The presence of the camera ensured the event had maximum public relations impact, one official later admitted. By the time the convoy rolled out, the press was already primed for headlines. The stage was set for a military solution, broadcast across the country. No one in uniform or behind a desk in Canberra seemed to doubt that machine guns would bring order to the wheat belt. The orders were clear: restore confidence, restore control, and do it with maximum visibility. On the second day, Major Meredith and his crew set up an ambush at a dam where more than 1,000 emus clustered to drink. The plan was simple: wait for the flock, then open fire with a Lewis gun. But as the trigger was pulled, the gun jammed after just 12 birds fell. The rest scattered in every direction, vanishing into the scrub before the weapon could be cleared. That single malfunction let nearly the entire flock escape untouched, thousands of birds slipping past the Army's best effort. Attempts to chase the emus across open ground went no better. The truck, weighed down by the gun and its crew, bounced over ruts and bogged in soft dirt. Emus easily outpaced the vehicle, darting away with sudden 90-degree turns. The gunner struggled to line up a shot as the birds zigzagged through the wheat. Each burst of fire sent the flock splitting into smaller, faster groups, making them even harder to target. After hours of pursuit and hundreds of rounds, the soldiers counted barely a handful of kills. By the end of the first week, the numbers told their own story. More than 2,500 rounds had been fired, with as few as 200 birds confirmed dead. That's a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 bullets for every emu. In his report, Meredith tried to capture the frustration. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They are like Zulus, whom even dumb bullets could not stop. The birds, it seemed, were not only surviving, they were winning. Within days, the newspapers had a field day. Headlines blared, "Emu Command has proved invincible," while cartoonists sketched birds in military helmets strutting past baffled soldiers. In Parliament, the jokes came thick and fast. One member suggested the birds deserved campaign medals for their service to the wheat belt. Hansard records show laughter echoing through the chamber as politicians debated whether to promote an emu to field marshal. Overseas, the story traveled quickly. Australia's finest, outwitted by a flock of birds. After just 6 days, the operation was called off, leaving officials scrambling for explanations as the press circled like hawks. The spectacle was over, but the embarrassment lingered. The emus, untouched by public opinion, simply kept marching on. When the guns were packed away, local farmers turned to bounty hunting. With every emu beak brought in, the Agricultural Board paid out a cash reward. In just 6 months of 1934, the ledgers recorded more than 57,000 emus killed. nearly 60 times the official military tally. Meanwhile, barrier fencing began to stretch across the wheat belt. Shire records and maintenance logs show that, after installation, emu damage to crops dropped to a fraction of previous years. Over time, the birds adapted again. Their numbers bounced back, and by 1999, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act made emus federally protected as native fauna. Today, the so-called losers of the Emu War stand as a national symbol, resilient, untouchable, and woven into Australia's digital folklore as proof that nature and simple solutions often outlast bureaucracy and spectacle. In 1932, official records show 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds were sent against 20,000 emus in Western Australia. The military fired nearly 10,000 rounds and recorded fewer than 1,000 confirmed kills. Newspapers at the time called the emus invincible, and Parliament joked about awarding medals to the birds. Documents prove that economic hardship, not military necessity, drove the operation, and that the government prioritized spectacle over solutions. What remains unknown are the full details of internal cabinet discussions, as no official minutes have been released. The emu bounty system and exclusion fencing, implemented after the military withdrawal, succeeded where force failed, with over 57,000 emus culled in 6 months by local hunters. Today, emus are protected by federal law, a legacy of mismanagement and adaptation. The Great Emu War stands as documented proof. When governments choose costly displays over practical fixes, failure is nearly guaranteed. Sometimes, the birds even win.